Aloha and welcome to our first annual Ponopono Peace Initiative Research Conference. My name is Naomi Peterson. I'm the president and co-founder of Ponopono Peace Initiative, and we're so excited to have you guys here and so honored to welcome each of you today. Whether you guys are joining us as a student or an alumni or practitioner or just a curious guest, we welcome you and we're just thrilled that you're here and delighted for your presence. We know that your commitment to peace building, whether it's academic or practical or deeply personal, is why we are all here. And we appreciate every ounce of commitment and support for this peace building and this great work. When we started Ponopono Peace Building, Ponopono Peace Initiative, we started it with the idea that peace builders needed more than just theories. They actually needed platforms, they needed support, and they also needed each other. Because peace building can be a lonely journey and it can be hard, and sometimes we don't see the change that we want fast. And so to be able to walk on this path together and to be able to be together and share each other's ideas, we believe that not only will it allow hope and courage for those who are starting the journey of peace building, but it also will allow us to go further than we ever could before. And so that's what today is. It's a space where you guys can all come together, whether you're students or practitioners or community members who are interested in this space, so you guys can share your bold ideas, challenge outdated narratives, and elevate research so that we can make peace tangible for everywhere, all around the world. It will help us to be able to create positive peace, not just end violence, but create positive peace in our homes, in our communities, in our schools, and in the world globally. Today, we will be having some topics that are difficult and hard. Peace building often walks into the space of hard and difficult spaces. And you might not actually see the world the same way as the person beside you or the person presenting, and that is okay. That is what we're here for. We're not here to be all alike. We're here to share our own stories and to learn from our stories. So peace building is about being able to learn from each other, to be able to be open and vulnerable with the expectation that by doing so, we can learn and grow and create a more peaceful, beautiful, inspiring world. Today, we're going to explore stories and research and projects from all over the world. They're going to touch on justice and healing and reconciliation, but they're all going to have a common thread, which is hope. Hope that we can actually make a difference, because that's why we're in this space. If there was no hope to make a difference, we wouldn't be here. So to our presenters, I just want to say a huge thank you for being here, for taking time. I know some of you have different time differences that you're dealing with, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. For our students and for our attendees, I want to just encourage you. I thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for having the courage to make this part of your academic journey, because it's really a little bit out of the box for some of you. And lots of your friends and family might not really understand exactly what you're doing. And so we appreciate you being here. And we invite you, as you listen to these presenters, as you listen to people who are just a little step ahead of you on this path of peace building, we invite you to listen deeply and ask big questions, and then connect intentionally. This is one of the big reasons why we're doing this, is so that peace builders at all stages and all places have a platform and a way to be able to connect with one another. So welcome, and let's build something beautiful together.
Aloha, everyone. Naomi, thank you for those beautiful opening remarks. My name is Reka Bordashimon, and I'm a board member at the Ponopono Peace Initiative, and I will be the moderator of today's conference session. And how this will going to happen, we have three different sessions. In session one, the topic is global conflict. In session two, the topic is peace building as healing. And in session three, it's multicultural approaches to peace building. So I will do a short introduction of all the speakers in a session at one time. And during the time when they do their presentation, I would like to ask you to, if you have any questions for the Q&A, insert your questions in the chat, and we will have 10 minutes for the speakers to answer the questions after each session. So let's just get into it. First session is about global conflict. Our first speaker, and I would like to apologize if I mispronounce some names, is Negalain Mandafiro, who is a career diplomat with a decade of experience in diplomacy, peace building, and communications. He has worked in Washington, D.C. as a fellow at a D.C.-based NGO and as public diplomacy and political affairs director at the Ethiopian Embassy in Washington, D.C. Negalain recently graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a Master of Global Affairs specializing in international peace studies. His work and research interests involve post-conflict reconciliation, international relations, and strategic communication. I will introduce the next speakers as well. And so speakers, you will just present after each other. So the second speaker will be McLean Day. McLean Day discovered peace building as an undergraduate student at BYU Hawaii, which inspired her to pursue a different career path than she ever imagined. She graduated in 2021 with a master's degree in advanced practice in peace building and conflict resolution from the University of Bradford, and then began her current role as adjunct faculty in the Intercultural Peacebuilding Department at BYU Hawaii in 2022. McLean loves the creative opportunities that working to constructively overcome conflict can bring, as she's seen in her work across the globe. The third speaker will be Whitney Headland. Whitney Headland is the recipient of a Kroc Institute Fellowship at the University of Notre Dame, where she is completing a master's degree in international peace studies. Her research primarily focuses on settler colonialism, spatiocide, and resistance. Whitney was most recently employed with International Justice Mission as the Global Compliance Lead for USG Awards, focused on combating forced labor, cyber scamming, and sex trafficking. Previously, Whitney spent nearly 5 years at the United States Agency for International Development as an analyst in the Research and Policy Division, working on cross-cutting issues such as human rights, biodiversity, and abuses within the health system. Whitney has relevant field experience in Dakar, Senegal, and Nablus, Palestine. She holds BAs in French and International Relations, as well as a certificate in Human Needs and Global Resources from Wheaton College. And our last speaker for this session will be Deepak Reddy. Deepak Reddy is a senior double majoring in intercultural peace building and business management with a focus on finance at BYU Hawaii. He is the founder of the proposed NGO Equity of Fiji, which focuses on addressing police brutality and promoting human rights in Fiji. Passionate about creating safer communities, Deepak is committed to fostering accountability and nonviolence in law enforcement. These will be our 4 speakers for this session. And I would like to say just a note to our speakers. Each of you have 10 minutes to speak, and I will make sure to keep the time on track. When you reach 8 minutes, I will send you a private message just indicating that you only have 2 minutes left. And I apologize in advance because I know that these are topics you probably could talk hours about. It's just because of the time constraint we have for the conference. We would like to give the opportunity for everyone to have the equal amount of time. So if that's sufficient, that's how I will just tell you how many minutes you have left. And also, please be ready for the Q&A session after our session. So I hope we're all ready for our amazing speakers. And I would like to give the microphone to our first speaker, and I'm really sorry if I mispronounced, Negalain Mandafiro.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. And you well pronounced my name. Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon and good morning, good evening, according to the time zone you are. I am in Maryland right now, and we're almost 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for the organizers, especially for the Ponopono Peace Initiative, for organizing this important event, and also for giving the opportunity for me to present this topic, which is part of my capstone for my graduation. But it's a research topic which is I am continued working on it since the problem that I gave the topic, which is still continuing. So can I share my screen?
Yes, of course, please.
Okay, thank you. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much. So my topic is about conflict in one part of Ethiopia, which is the second largest region in Ethiopia, which is part of the northern part of Ethiopia, which is Amhara region. Probably some of you have heard, or maybe all of you have heard about the conflict in Tigray region of Ethiopia, which was between 2020 and 2022, which was one of the most devastating conflicts the country have had in its recent history, which has been highly reported by international media and also with an attention by governments and think tanks across the world, and also especially Ethiopian diaspora residing in the country, in the United States and European countries because of their protests. And why I choose this, the Forgotten War, prospects of peace and challenges in the Amhara region of Ethiopia, because the topic of our discussion is about peace building and reconciliation. Why I brought this idea is because when we have a conflict and when we have a peace agreement, unless we have a comprehensive peace agreement and that is participatory, it's likely that another round of conflict might happen. And that's exactly what happened in Ethiopia. Even though the country was able to conclude this conflict, the Tigray conflict in 2022 in South Africa, in a peace agreement in Pretoria between the federal government and the Tigrayan forces, because of the conflict failed to be comprehensive, it created another round of conflict in one of its another regions, which is the Amhara region. So I will give some details about this conflict and how this happened and what are the reasons behind shortly. But the main argument I have is when you think about a conflict and when you think about peace agreement and reconciliation between conflicting parties, unless we have brought as much as we can the conflicting parties, unless we make it inclusive as much as possible, unless we brought all conflicting parties as much as we can, it's likely that this country or this community is going to go back to conflict. That's what happened in Ethiopia. So I'll give a sense what I'm trying to say about that. So to give you a background about Ethiopia, in 2015, 2016, there was a widespread conflict, a widespread youth-led protest for political transformation in Ethiopia. And the government was not able to answer peacefully for these protesters, especially youth protesters. And this protest continues until 2018. And this forced the previous prime minister to resign. And for Ethiopia got a new prime minister, which is Abiy Ahmed, who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2019, which was mostly for making a rapprochement with Eritrea, which we were in no peace, no war. So with the coming of the new prime minister, he made a lot of political reforms, making a lot of press freedom and also inviting exiled political parties and politicians to come back to Ethiopia. And it was the kind of renaissance and political, happiness all over Ethiopia. Everybody was cheering the international community, international organizations, the media, and it was a kind of a new era for Ethiopia's political system and democratic transition. But in 2020, because the Tigray region was the center for the previous parties, the previous governors, a stronghold. So the people and the party leaders in this region, they were not happy because they feel that they are being pushed against all this political transformation. And then they start, organizing themselves in the Tigray region, and then they hold an election, and the federal government led by Abiy Ahmed, it erupted a conflict in November 2020, which created the devastating conflict and which continues for almost 2 years. So during this conflict, the Amhara region, the region as a region, and local militias were affiliated with the federal government and they supported the federal government. So here's the problem. So during this conflict, the Amhara region and militias in this region were supporting and they were allied with the federal government when the Tigray forces are in the Tigray region fight with the federal government. Then in 2022, November, a peace deal happened between the federal government and the Tigray forces. But the local militia from the Amhara region, with their own questions, they were omitted from this peace negotiation and the agreement. So the government after that thinks that the government wants to incorporate all local militias under the federal army. Then the local militias in Amhara region, they felt that we're in danger with the Tigray region, so we're not going to relinquish our arms, and we're going to arm ourselves and continue, including the local special militia in the Amhara region. Then the government interrupted in the region to forcefully disarm the militia, the local militia, who were supporting the government in the war in between 2020 and 2022. So this creates, and this is the first beginning of the conflict between the federal government and local militias in the Amhara region. So I have these people who were the presidents since 2013 and the current president. You can see in almost in the last 6 years, we have like 5 or 4 presidents who were, changing every year. In every president was changing year after year because of, you can tell how much political turmoil is going on in that region because none of them were able to bring peace in that specific region. So the federal government and the region kept changing the presidents, and one was assassinated in March 2019. So it can tell how much the region is under huge political turmoil. So why the regional armies are fighting the federal government? So there are some reasons, outstanding and immediate. The first is the region wants a constitutional reform. There are territorial disputes between the regional government and also the neighboring Tigray region. There's also a quest for political representation with the federal government. And also, there are close to 10 million Amharas, ethnic Amharas, living outside of the region. And there's a repeated attack against these Amharas. So some of the reasons that the local militias fighting the federal government in Ethiopia is because of these reasons. But having all these major reasons, the immediate triggers were the Tigray peace deal. Because of the Tigray peace deal, the federal government and the Tigray region, they are making peace, but the Amhara local militia felt they were left behind. So now the federal government at Tigray might attack the Amhara region. So that's one of the reasons that as immediate trigger. And also the April 2023 disarmament decree by the federal government was also another immediate cause for the local militia in Amhara region to fight back the federal government. So who are fighting in the Amhara region against the federal government? So the official name for the group that's fighting the federal government, Amhara regional, the Fano militia. They're called Fano militia, which is a voluntary group of local militias, formerly regional special forces, and all those who organized during the Tigray war. They're voluntary groups, and then they organize themselves, and they're now fighting for the government. They're voluntary. They have like an identity organization, and they have 4 main organizations and 4 of main parts of the region in the west, central, and northern and eastern part of the region. So how the voices are now happening? It's been 2 years since the start of this conflict in Amhara region. So there's a lot of different voices about the federal government, the Fano militia, and the public. The government says, including the prime minister, these groups are very divided. They don't have a united group, that we're not able to negotiate. We don't know with whom to talk. And the militia group, they are saying that we don't trust the federal government. So there's a lot of divided voices in towards understanding the conflict. So what's the key takeaway in this conflict in the last 2 years? Did I have time or I'm
Well,
almost.
only 30 seconds left. I'm really sorry.
Okay. I'll wrap up within that. So to give you what the consequence, we have almost 4,800 schools were destroyed, more than 5,000 and more than that, students have been out of school, and this number has been growing. And the recent data has been more, it's close to 5 million, and over 6,000 civilians have been killed. So as a peace, my recommendation for peace deal is it needs to be a comprehensive peace deal between all Ethiopian political actors. It's not a conflict between the two parties. Ethiopia needs a comprehensive peace negotiation and reconciliation, which includes all political actors in the country, including Tigray and other parts of the region, the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up is McLean Day.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. Let me just share my screen here. I'm really looking forward to presenting today. This is let's see. Okay, hopefully you can all see that well. This is a part of the world that is of a large interest to me between my undergraduate and graduate education. And also, I share this just as a little bit of, positionality, a note of my own positionality with this conflict. I lived and worked in Ukraine through volunteer service work. And while I was there, I was primarily in the eastern regions of the country, and I was trained to speak Russian. And so as I go into this today, what I really want to do, there are so many things that could be talked about with the Russia-Ukraine war. After my experience living in this region, it prompted me to study this a lot more in graduate school, and it's still an area that I'm very much tied to looking at what is happening here, having friends on both sides of this conflict. And I want to do something a little different today. And I've titled my presentation, The Causal Loops of the Russia-Ukraine War. So causal loop maps this is a concept that I was introduced to in graduate school. And what I really love about this concept is this is a different kind of way of systems thinking that allows for conflict analysis to happen in a non-linear kind of pattern. And as a peace builder, I think this is really important and helpful to us because of the complexities that we often see in conflict. And as we seek better ways to build peace, having that deeper understanding of what are the factors at play in conflict is very important and invaluable to us as peace builders. And so with this particular conflict, with the Russia-Ukraine war, there are so many inner working dynamics that are shaping this war. Things like politics, history, ethnic relationships, all of these are topics that I could speak on for much more than 10 minutes. But what I want to do is just kind of look at these different loops together and just raise, what I kind of envision in my mind when I think about all of the interlooping factors with this conflict. And invite you as the listener to think about your own positionality to this conflict. What are ways that you are engaging in a part of this, even if it's just as simple as, I read the news and I think about this and I have conversations with my friends about these things that are happening in the world. So here on this slide, I put a little image of the Matryoshka dolls. I'm not sure if anybody's ever seen these, otherwise known as Russian nesting dolls. And I think this is another way to kind of think about the loops that I will present. When you have these little nesting dolls, Russian nesting dolls are also a big part of Ukraine, right? I brought some home when I ended my time there. But what I love about this idea is that when we think of conflict, a lot of times there's issues that are embedded and impacted within. We just heard in the last presentation and thinking about Ethiopia, how some of these issues are embedded within each other. And I'm sure that we'll see that in other conflicts and in other things that are shared today. And so as we seek to kind of unpack this conflict, I want to try to challenge us as we look at these different loops of all of the things that we need to consider when understanding what's happening with this particular with this conflict. So just a little bit of the breakdown of each loop. And again, if there's a loop that you want to hear me talk a little bit more about, maybe stick it in the chat for the Q&A later. I am going to move pretty quickly through these just because I want to give a more comprehensive view of these little interworking nested issues here in this form of a causal loop map. So the first loop is the dissolvement of the USSR, the Soviet Union. The second loop is looking at the political history of Ukraine. And then the third loop looks at shifting power in Russia. Again, another kind of way to look at the political history in Russia over the past few decades. We also need to consider the role that the West plays in their influence and involvement on both Ukraine and Russia as a space and as nations. The competing ethnic identities between Ukrainian and Russian populations, and then finally, the effect that Ukrainian political instability has had on Russian power over the years. These are two really interesting interworking dynamics. So breaking down, and again, these are very, very brief summaries, overviews as we look at these different issues. So the first loop, the dissolvement of the USSR. So one of the things that I really didn't realize until I started to study this region of the world and try to understand the history of what this really meant was that the Soviet Union didn't officially dissolve until December 26th of 1991. Now, that's a little later than I had previously thought going into this. And when you look at these dates of when independence was granted to Ukraine, as satellite nations started to gain more independence, it really creates this interesting way to kind of think about what the dissolvement of this meant. As an American, I grew up learning a lot about the Cold War in history, but we didn't really talk about what was happening on that side of the world kind of side of things with the dissolvement of the USSR, other than it's great, no longer in the Cold War. And so just some important things to remember is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, power within Russia became very fragmented. They went from having all of this strength in satellite nations to now having a diaspora of their population. And with the collapse, it left behind a lot of conflicts that have remained frozen, Ukraine being one that has slowly unthawed over time. So when we look at the political history of Ukraine, we can see this collapse of the Soviet Union and being a positive thing in the sense of Ukraine now has national independence. Well, whatever view you want to have on that, one of the things we need to remember about the Ukrainian political history is that Ukraine was a part of the Russian Empire long before the Soviet Union came to be, and they've had ties to Russia for many years. And with this new independence that they were given, it has created a lot of political instability. Again, independence was granted in 1991. By 2004, there was the Orange Revolution, where political unrest grew in Ukraine due to a falsified presidential election. Again, in 2014, with the conflict of Crimea, things were escalated. The current presidency at the time was very pro-siding with Russia on economic and political deals. They fled to the Kremlin, and the presidency that came in right after that was very pro-West. And so this instability and this competing narrative has created a lot of tension within their own country over their short time in having this national independence. And then you look at the shifting power balances in Russia. Russia has a very bloody history prior to the Soviet Union. When we look at the Bolsheviks into World War I, into World War II, and as this power has shifted, one of the things that's been very interesting to look at in connection with this is the role that Putin has played in presidency. He was elected in by a 53% majority vote in 2000, and he has essentially maintained presidential power since he was elected in. For the short term he was elected, that he ended his office, they changed the constitution so that he could be voted back in. And so this is something to be mindful of when we think about this. Now, I'm going to quickly go over the last three. I think the role that the West plays is something that we've seen in news headlines with things like, will Ukraine be a part of the European Union or NATO? We're all familiar with the relationships that other countries have with Russia, especially the US, having this conflicting relationship over time. And then we have these competing ethnic identities. These are things like food, culture, music. Living in the region, you can see a lot of the similarities. And those similarities now with the war are just exacerbating the differences of making things so much more polarized. If you have Ukrainians who no longer want to speak Russia because they think that that is violating the semblance of national identity. And then finally, as Ukraine has struggled with this competing national identity and the political instability over years, that gives way as this power in Russia sort of shifts. It gives them the opportunity to come in and do things like take back Crimea, annex parts of the country. And it creates this really, really tricky kind of political narrative in thinking about and understanding how all of these are connected. So I'm coming up on time. Just as I close, the implications for us as peace builders, I think wherever we're at in the world, whatever nation we're a part of, the groups that we're a part of, this is a conflict that has been going on for 3 years, right? I don't think we talk about it as much anymore because we've become so entrenched. And I just want to challenge everybody in thinking about things maybe a little non-linearly and consider what those implications are and how we can continue conversations of encouraging those making the decisions for a more peaceful resolution. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, McLean. Our next speaker is Whitney Headland.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to share my screen. You give me 1 minute. Okay. Sorry, I'm not seeing my screen show up. I'm going to just try to share. Okay, let's see if this will work. Okay. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Try to go to slideshow. Hopefully this will work. Great. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to present this research. I'm quite excited about this. I've been able to present this research at some other conferences in Notre Dame, but my name is Whitney Headland. I'm a master's student at Notre Dame, and my degree is in global affairs with a concentration in international peace studies. And today I'll be presenting on spatiocide and intersection of environmental violence, biopolitics, and necropolitics. And so first, I just want to begin with an introduction to the concept of spatiocide. Then I'll explore the 3 principles of spatiocide, and then examine how they intersect with this concept of environmental violence, biopolitics, and necropolitics. And then I'll finish with some key questions and opportunities for further exploration. So first, I want to speak to my research question, which is, does spatiocide illuminate a gap within the related literature on settler colonial violence, or is it a redundant concept? And then to begin kind of setting our foundation, I want to define spatiocide. So spatiocide is a term coined by Sari Hanafi, who is a professor of sociology at the American University of Beirut. And spatiocide is a concept that is used to explore a specific type of settler colonial violence in the Palestine-Israel context. And Hanafi defines spatiocide as a form of settler colonial violence that targets the land for the purpose of rendering inevitable the quote-unquote voluntary transfer of the Palestinian population, primarily by targeting the land in space upon which Palestinian people live. So within Hanafi's definition of spatiocide, he has 3 principles. And so the first principle is the principle of colonization, the second is the state of exception, and then the third is the principle of separation. His first principle, the principle of colonization, explores how the colonizer manages the day-to-day lived reality of its colonized population, and exploits the natural resources in the land that they rely upon. And this is accomplished primarily in the Palestine-Israel context through systematic dispossession and economic dependency. That second section on the other side of the screen is the principle of separation. Hanafi's principle of separation looks at how the settler colonial entity uses the divide and conquer strategy to fragment the land and space upon which indigenous population lives in order to maintain control. And this is accomplished via colonial fragmentations, via settlements and bypass roads to the West Bank, and also through the status of citizenship. So If you're familiar at all with the Palestine context, there are three types of citizenship. The first, which is granted only to Israelis, which allows for full access to rights under Israeli law. The second is the 48 Palestinians, which were sectioned off within 1948 conflict, and those lines redrawn, who have some rights under Israeli law. And then you have Palestinians who have Section C citizenship, which are primarily in the West Bank and Gaza, who have a completely limited citizenship status and live under full military occupation. And then Hanafi's third principle is the state of exception. And this explores how the colonizer enacts new sovereignties to normalize the principle of colonization and the principle of separation, and then effectively reduces the population to a state of bare life. So first, let's explore the topic of environmental violence and spatiocide. So I want to explore themes that were related to spatiocide and also settler colonial violence. And the first theme I thought of was environmental violence. So here I want to highlight how Israel uses greenwashing, such as establishing national parks or archaeological digs, restricts natural resources, namely water, and also restricts natural resource use and agricultural use, and also pollutes the space upon which the Palestinian people live. So with greenwashing, this is typically used to disinherit Palestinians of their traditional land. So you can look at how the Jewish National Fund, which is an international NGO, will actually plant trees on Palestinian land, which will then become, under Israeli law, Jewish. Or the way that Israel establishes national parks, specifically in contested areas such as Sheikh Jarrah or East Jerusalem, to kind of section off corners of land, which will then be completely under Israeli control. And next, I want to speak to how the intersection of spatiocide and biopolitics actually, again, strengthens this concept of disinheritance and disenfranchisement. So biopolitics is a term coined by Foucault that investigates how political power is used to control and regulate the lives of a population. So in these examples, I draw upon checkpoints, home demolitions, imprisonment, and maiming. And I want to hone in here on the concept of maiming as a form of spatiocide and biopolitics, because this is a form of settler colonial violence that is kind of operates within a no man's land of definition. So I draw upon this concept from Jesper Poor's paper, The Right to Maim, and I interrogate how Israel enacts Hanafi's state of exception to debilitate the Palestinian population by using a shoot to maim instead of a shoot to kill policy. And this effectively debilitates Palestinian space through checkpoints and other forms of spatial fragmentation. And then I also argue in my paper that this is drawing from a paper that I've written, but Poor argues that the right to maim cannot be defined within either category of necropolitics or biopolitics, but actually operates within a third kind of section, because biopolitics and necropolitics do not proceed through making live or making die, letting live or letting die. Instead, Poor argues that maiming proceeds through will not let die. So these strategies combine to weaponize time and space and bring about what I call, and other scholars call, the slow death or stalling of Palestinian life. Okay. And then finally, I want to look at the manner in which necropolitics fits into the framework of spatiocide. So this idea of necropolitics is primarily taken from Membe, who defines necropolitics as the power and capacity to dictate who may live and who must die. And Membe argues that necropolitics is the ultimate expression of colonial sovereignty. And he defines death worlds as a new and unique form of social existence in which the vast populations are subjected to conditions of life, conferring upon them the status of, quote, living dead. And in this section, I explore how Gazans have resisted necropolitical spatiocide through collecting what the Arabic word is ashla, or scattered flesh. And this idea of collecting ashla, or scattered flesh, as a form of resistance comes from Dr. Nadir Shalhoub-Kevorkian's piece, Ashla and the Genocide in Gaza, Livability Against Fragmented Flesh. And so in her piece, she demonstrates how the collection of ashla actually subverts Israeli control over death and creates a new temporal reality in which one can be whole, cared for by family, community, and connected to the land through a dignified burial. And this act of resistance allows Gazans to resist the genocidal settler colonial regime that desperately seeks to destroy, separate, and dehumanize for the purpose of replacing the native population. And then I want to go back to my research question. I have 2 minutes. I can do this. Is spatiocidal a useful or redundant term within the settler colonial literature? And so, as you can likely see, spatiocide overlaps with many forms of settler colonial violence. And the 3 forms I explored all touch upon Hanafi's principles of spatiocide. So environmental violence mainly operates within the principle of Hanafi's colonization. Biopolitics primarily fits under Hanafi's principle of separation, and necropolitics can be counted under the state of exception. And I charted the strengths of spatiocide as it can be used as an umbrella term to encompass various forms of settler colonial violence. I have 1 minute, I can do this. And also some weaknesses, looking at how this is a term that's actually redundant with some of the other terms I laid out, such as necropolitics and biopolitics. But I see that the unique aspect of spatiocide is being able to capture some of these other forms of subversive violence that aren't overt, but still accomplish the same goal that settler colonial states have, which is ultimately to replace the native population. So for future research, I think one can map spatiocidal violence against how Israel expresses and establishes its sovereignty, and also look at spatiocide as a necessary condition to settler colonialism broadly, and look at other contexts of settler colonial states. So for my capstone research, I'll be going to South Africa and looking at if spatiocide is a relevant concept there as well. So with all that being said, thank you so much for the opportunity to present this research. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and also feel free to reach out to me directly via email. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Our next speaker is Deepak Reddy.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Oh, I've sent a request. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This research is my topic is like not to just meant to downgrade or criticize the police in Fiji, but to offer support that aligns with promoting a better practice and creating a fairness system. Imagine living in a society where those meant to protect us are the one harming us. This is a reality for some in Fiji, where concerns like police brutality and human rights violation are growing. In recent years, the report of police misconduct have raised serious concern about abuse and power and civil rights. A November 2024 report by FijiLive.com detailed 3 new complaints in Nassau, including the assault of bystander. These cases are part of the rising trend, with the police brutality complaint increasing sharply since in 2019. From 2015 to 2020, over 400 criminal charges were filed against Fijian police and military officers, including the case of assault of manslaughter, even abduction. These numbers reflect systematic issue rooted in poor accountability and a lack of proper training. You can see from the following images and also from the QR code which I've provided. These are the link to some of the YouTube videos which you can take a picture of it and want to see. It just shows some of the brutality videos. With this problem in mind, I came with a NGO program it's a proposed NGO program called Equity of Fiji with my mentor. Dr. David Whippy is a professor of intercultural peace building classes here at BYU Hawaii. I presented this research and project in his NGO class to address this issue, to promote the peaceful interaction and to rebuild the trust between citizen and authority like police. Equity of Fiji's choose to operate in Suva and Lautoka. This both strategic and necessary as these cities are seen significant report of police brutality. The United Nations highlights that NGO in conflict prone areas can offer more effective solution. Why here? It is based on these two cities because not only the main police headquarters are located, but also main training areas are also located here. One change happens in these two major cities, it goes down easily to other towns and community in Fiji. The mission aims to stop harassment by teaching both authorities and the public about the respect, peace, and the law. It helps everyone to understand their rights and responsibility, leading to a fairness and more peaceful society. The vision, on the other hand, focus on the building a society where everyone is treated fairly and with respected, which is essential to this peace and justice. It emphasized non-violence in a way to resolve conflict and promote harmony by ensuring both civilian and authority act with dignity, and it helps create a stable and equitable environment for all. These values are important because they work together to build a fairness and a peaceful society. Respect ensures everyone is treated with the dignity, while non-violence encourages peaceful solution to the conflict. Empowerment gives people to knowledge that protect their rights, and accountability ensures responsible behavior from both individuals and authorities. Education is essential for driving long-term change, helps people understand their rights and how to create a more just and equal community. From my own research, I found that the approach that this can be used is one of the theory which I learned in my peace building class is people to people approach. This connects our peace building program that we have called see people as people and recognize a humanity. Other programs that I have optional view are designed for behavioral change program, integrated for peace building and development program. But based on my research, people to people approach best works for this because it directly engage both the public and authority in building and understanding the respect. So these are three ways which I can implement this approach, which is creating awareness, integrated peace education, and training police. People to people just not necessarily meant to just me and you, but it also takes account in main stakeholders and act how they should work in this program. Collaboration needs to happen between people within the Fiji. These groups collaborate. They are created comprehensive system where laws are created, enforced, and respected in a way that upholds human rights and foster peace. The government sets the stage, I believe, and police enforce the law. The Ministry of Education shapes the future generation of the students, and IRC provides the critical supports for those in need, ensuring the accountability and the protection. Some of the activity that I can start based on the people to people approach awareness campaign, peace building program, academic training for police force, and that one really wanna focus on is academic training. And these are three main of found in a research that government that have a possible roadblocks, which is government pushback that government might not support the program and could try to stop if I disagree with my idea. Lack of trust and peace might not trust the people not might trust my program because it is new to the thing. Raising fund can be a issue, and since it is new, like people might have less trust on my NGO program. I feel like raising funds, it can be really easy if I approach to government. Fund will be supported public safety and easier to work with, like some of the NGOs in Fiji, local businesses, and international organization like IRC if they can support me with this. And how we can start this, I believe, like advertising. And these are some of the platform which I can come up with. Social media, it helps spread the word fast and get people involved and donating. Schools, it teaches students about equity and creating supporters where like teachers can teach and raise this issue as well. I feel like the other one is TV and radio, where it reach many people and bring attention and to inform the local communities and get the support because of it. Because like I feel like in Fiji, this to TV and radio is really big thing where people really get involved with. But social media, like upcoming one is this Facebook, is really good as well. I feel like I'm almost to the end. In conclusion, this research shows that importance of education, awareness, and teamwork better between the government, police, and NGO to create a fairness Fiji by focusing on respect, non-violence, and accountability. And using the platform like social media, schools, TV, and radio, we can spread the word and get support, although changes like government resistance, trust, and funding may arise. Working together, but can lead to a real change. So I did this research because I saw the problem and I wanted to make a difference. The goal is to create a culture of peace and good leadership and mutual respect in Fiji's community. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much, Deepik. And now we're going to move on to our first Q&A session for session 1. The first question is to Negalain. What do you see as one of the methods to help the parties out of their entrenched positions and come to the table? So this is a question to our first speaker.
Thank you so much for the question. It's actually a very nice question that could help the parties to come to a table, because the possible solution that in the conflict in the Amhara region, and even still we have active conflict in the western part of Ethiopia, in the Oromia region. What can help the two parties, especially the federal government and the militia group in the Amhara region specifically, is to discuss and to negotiate politically. And to do this, there should be a trusted and internationally supported mediation between the two groups, because we were able to stop the Tigray conflict not because the government was, okay to peace and the Tigray forces were able to end peace. It's because there was a very huge international push from the UN, from the United States, and from the European Union. There was a lot of sanctions and a lot of political pressure from international organizations and countries and partner countries. So the Amhara militia group and the federal government has to be pushed and pressured from the international community, and also from partner countries like the United States and the European Union, so that its parties can sit and negotiate all the differences they have. As I said in my conclusion, this is not just a question between the federal government and the Amhara region and the militia. There needs to be a comprehensive political dialogue in Ethiopia, because there are a lot of minor and different, protracted militia groups elsewhere in the country, everywhere. So a comprehensive dialogue is the best way to end conflict and peace in Ethiopia.
Thank you so much for your answer. The other question is to McLean. McLean, how do you see Russia's role in fueling political instability in Ukraine? Did that also show up in your research?
Yeah, so this is a big part of the research, and a lot of it is tied when you look at the economics between the two countries. I think, and this kind of goes back to that first loop with the dissolvement of the Soviet Union. A lot of the economic deal stayed tied to the government in Russia. But in Ukraine, it spaced out where you had one group that was emergent that wanted the economy to stay tied to Russia, whereas the other group in Ukraine wanted the economy to be more tied to the West and to Europe. And so that has just continued to slowly escalate over time. So a big thing that we're seeing now, specifically with the war, is one of the emerging kind of countries that really was kind of more forward than some of the other European countries was Germany in making a lot of oil and trade deals economically with Ukraine. And over the past couple of years, as Ukraine, prior to the war started having like, I don't know if you remember the headlines in the news with like the oil deal pipeline goes to Germany over Russia. That was one of the big ones. And now what we're seeing in the war is Germany is one of the biggest funders for missiles and developing the military capabilities of Ukraine, specifically based on the economic relationship that they already had prior with the economy of the oil. And so, I think not to oversimplify, but we have this issue in Ukraine with the political instability of, is Russia our economic ally, or do we need to be branching out more to the West? And they've used that as a polarizing kind of thing within the country, and Russia has taken advantage of it. I think there's a strong case to say that this is one of the reasons why Russia was able to come in and take Crimea the way that they did, is they were capitalizing on the political instability in 2014, where the current president that was very pro supporting Russian economics with their trade deals fled to the Kremlin, and then the new presidency coming in was very pro working with the West, and they came in and took Crimea as a way to kind of maintain that hold on Ukraine. There's a lot of pressure in the way that Russian oligarchs hold business ties over Ukraine in deals. And again, it's mostly, I think, tied to the economy where you see that. So this is a very in short way to kind of answer the question, but there's a lot of pressure there, especially when you look not necessarily on the economic level, but you have a lot of people living in the region who have family that lives in Russia, or a lot of people in Russia who have family that lives in Ukraine, and these different kind of familiar relationships also affect things for Ukrainians in choosing what side do they fall on when it comes to making these political and economic deals. There's immense pressure for Russia to keep the ties with them rather than branching out to the West. So that was leading up to it, and of course we see how that has culminated to what we have now with the war.
Thank you so much for that answer, McLean. And we have more questions, but unfortunately, for the sake of time, we won't be able to ask more. So I would encourage all those who ask questions to reach out directly to the presenters, where you can continue this discussion, because there is so much to talk about these topics. But let's move on to our second session now. I'd like to welcome again those who just joined us for Ponopono Peace Initiative's research conference. And our second session topic is peace building as healing. Our first speaker will be Jose Barzola. Jose Barzola is a highly organized higher education administrator with over 20 years of experience and success in administration student development within academic and student affairs. Jose has also been an affiliate faculty teaching courses on peace and conflict transformations at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. For over 10 years, Jose has served the university, partner agencies, nonprofits, and communities in Hawaii and abroad as a professional mediator and facilitator. After Jose Barzola, we have Roger Epstein. Roger Epstein is the CEO of the Maitreya Institute and has been actively involved with forgiveness and gratitude concepts since he became the facilitator of the Hawaii Forgiveness Project in 2003. He was approached last summer by a German woman who said that many Germans still feel shame and guilt about their country's atrocities in World War II and need forgiveness. This concept culminated in a 4-day program in Frankfurt, Germany on ancestral healing beginning May 8, 2025, the 80th anniversary of Germany's surrender in 1942. So the topic of Rogers is Peace Through Forgiveness, the German Journey After World War II. And then we will have a third presenter, Camilla Pedersen, about understanding institutional betrayal, addressing sexual violence on campus. Camilla is an intercultural peacebuilding student at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. She is a passionate advocate for women's rights and social issues, focusing on creating equitable solutions for vulnerable populations. She will be presenting on her senior project. So without further ado, I would like to give the microphone to Jose Barzola.
Thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you for being with you all. A lot of wonderful conversations had today, and I understand I'm on a time limit, so I'm timing myself as well. So thank you. One thing that really resonates with me, I love pivoting. So although I have a presentation, and I'll get to it in a minute, and I'll probably go through it a little bit fast. And I apologize if I'm talking a little bit fast. This is the East Coast person in me to try to accommodate as much with the time allotted. But I think for folks that are listening, one of the things early on that Naomi did a mention was about how folks that may have been in this field a little longer than some of the students out there. And I just kind of want to acknowledge the students or anybody in the audience that's listening who might think of themselves as they're just at the beginning of this journey, going into this peace building field. I would kind of challenge the shifting your perspective of what have you already been doing to build those bridges over your lifetime? Because when people ask me that question of like, oh, how did you know you wanted to go? And I always share my reflection of like, you know, I when I was 6, 7, I was getting friends and family sitting down like, and I was unofficially doing mediation without, even knowing that. It was just naturally and honestly what I thought would be the right thing to do. I was like, these two people aren't actually listening to each other. So what A person is saying to B, so I was the intermediary there. Even though I may have had, an invested interest because loved ones, that kind of stuff. Just being able to provide that guidance, whether you were in school and maybe you weren't the one that necessarily broke up that fight, or maybe you were, or maybe you were the person that talked to the persons who got into those situations. How have you been bridge building over your life? Is kind of what the question that I would kind of just bring out to folks to just think about that. And you too have been doing peace building work. That's what I'm getting at. And so one of the big things I love doing is empowering folks and letting them know that I just happen to be have the privilege and the honor to get it onto these type of platforms to be able to share about my own journey. But yeah, there's a lot of everyday things that we do in the everyday lives that going back to the topic of healing on how we not only take care of ourselves, but how we take care of our community and our loved ones. And so that in itself, just going to the doctors, you're taking proactive steps. That's positive peace right there. Simple as that, going out for a walk or a jog, being in community with your friends, practicing that, self-care. That's peace building to me. So I just throw that out there at the beginning. And I know that took up some time, and we'll get to the slides. And a lot of what my talk will be about is going to be, yes, it's about building compassion and building empathy. I've gathered that that's really at the core of how we can try to do better, building bridges. And so anything on here, I'm open source. Feel free to share or use it for yourself. I encourage anytime you have a meeting, a presentation, a gathering, have some community guidelines. Don't call them ground rules because people don't really like the words rules, but community guidelines, just a little bit more. It's been more receptive that way. Talking about a brave space, not so much a safe space, because one of my students taught me that there's no such thing as a safe space, but hopefully we can talk and get to know each other a little better and create a brave space where we can feel comfortable sharing, practicing that active listening, sharing your voice, respecting each other, and the rest that's on there. But yeah, I encourage this just for anything. It's kind of like you're going on this journey together, and everyone in your space has to agree that, yes, we're in agreement with this, and then be okay talking about how can you change this? Is there anything else we'd love to add to this? I love it when I'm in groups and someone in the audience is like, oh, let's do eating. Let's add that to the list, or let's add laughing, because it gives me a good sense of like, okay, this is the kind of space I'm walking into. Wonderful. Um, Centering activities. Some folks might know them as icebreakers. I like calling them centering activity. And one of the things I'm going to get at is the words that we use to engage with our community is so important, because this is just an example of one, sharing the story of your name, what you do, what brings you joy. There are actually three open-ended questions. Story of your name. It could be, how you got your name. It could be the evolution of your name, trying to get back your original name. My original name is actually pronounced Jose Barzola, and that's one of the things I'm hopefully in the next past year, I'm trying to get in the practice of using myself, but it's not something that I'm accustomed to. But I'm also trying to push myself to lean into my discomfort, which at one point might have been my own comfort. So there's multiple layers of conversation there. What I do, from a Western context, many times we talk about our jobs and we associate what we do with our livelihood. And as opposed to like, we wake up, we go get some coffee, we meet up with a friend, what brings you joy? Is it those loved ones in your family? Is it a certain smile that you can put on someone? Or is it like, I don't know, buying that boat or something? So just kind of gives you different layers to people. And so I encourage whatever circles you have, if you're in meetings, I encourage you to try to center an activity because you never know what you might learn from this around you. There's multiple pathways to peace building I love to talk about and healing, inclusive pathways. We're going to talk about what hasn't been explored, thinking outside the box. One really fun thing that I learned recently is like, when is banana healthiest? And we always think like, oh no, it has to be certain yellow or it has to be very like, spotted already. But technically I learned like at all stages you could eat the banana. It may not be, to your taste, but they are going to be different healing factors and different layers of fiber or, you know, um, of extra sugar that might be available. So just kind of giving a quick example of that. How do we build bridges to bridge the gap? The importance of language proficiency, cultural sensitivity, translation, interpretation, technology, importance of context, empathy, active listening. We talked building healthy, positive relationships and how important that is, to be humble, to be genuine with the people around you. And these are different things that kind of go into that. Focusing on everyday conversations. You never know what you might say that might just, early on, I learned like using the terminology like, hey guys, I actually may have just lost half or more of the audience because I wasn't conscientious of the people there. How about, hey, hi everyone, hello everyone, hey folks, so just understanding that there's language matters, especially as a second English as a second language speaker. I'm very peculiar about like, oh, why is certain things utilized as opposed to others? I love introducing conflict styles because I feel like till this day, not everyone is well aware of what their conflict style is or what others are. But the best way to read this is if your relationship's really high and the goal you're trying to achieve is high, collaboration. That's really what we want to try to strive to. It's easier said than done, but with practice, I like to think we can get there. Matter of perspective, are we trying to figure out what's actually right for one person or what's right for a community as a whole? So if we think of it that way, then we can actually have a discussion. Active listening, you're all doing a wonderful job already. Coping strategies, how do you take care of yourself? When I talked about peace building initiatives, I'm really just talking about collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships through dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, exploring ways to shift our own perspective. And when they talk about dialogue, I mean a tone of voice is involved, not just a message and email. That's actually where a lot of conflict tends to come up, unfortunately. And cross-cultural understanding perspectives. You could have twins that have grown up in the same room. They're going to see the world very differently. And so these are just examples of different things that I've explored and had the honor to collaborate with students in Japan, students here in Hawaii, community dialogues. I call them that. They could be like peace circles and Polina circles, restorative justice circles, just getting people together to talk to each other. As wild as it sounds, people do not have that opportunity too much at a university level. Peer mediation, supporting youth. There is a plethora of digital storytelling, YouTube channel, the podcast. There's an upcoming exhibit happening right here at the university in honor of the 80th anniversary. There's multiple spaces where you can learn further about these skill sets. I teach some classes. There's some local amazing nonprofits doing some amazing work in this space as well. I'm just going through them, not really mentioning them, but it's just some additional projects that I've done. In concluding thoughts, I really just leave you with the opportunity to don't forget to build those bridges, lean to your discomfort, and as you practice reflection, practice gratitude too. Like who who was the community that um, allowed you to be here, and thank them for that. That's so important. So with that being said, thank you so much. I believe I'm at my 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Jose. That was perfectly 10 minutes. Thank you. And now our next speaker is Roger Epstein. Oh, Roger, you're muted. Your microphone.
Hi, Jose, that was terrific. I don't know how you got so much information in all that time, but I'm just going to focus on one topic that I think is really critical, not so much to the skills of getting together, but underlying a resolution, and that's about forgiveness. And as Reka said in the beginning, I was an international business lawyer for 55 years and have also spent about 50 years working on interfaith, and the last 20 with a focus on forgiveness, having been the host of something called the Hawaii Forgiveness Project and monthly meetings for about over 15 years. So in this context, what I mean by forgiveness is letting go of the past so it doesn't adversely affect your being at your best in the present moment, which of course is the only time you've ever taken any action, including trying to resolve difficulties. Forgiveness is not about reconciliation with someone that hurt you, or still needing that person to make restitution as appropriate for what they've done. Forgiveness is for yourself, the person who has been hurt, to eliminate the pain that you're causing yourself by holding on to the anger, shame, guilt, or other similar negative feelings. As a wonderful mentor of mine and author of a book on forgiveness, Jerry Jampolsky, used to say, not letting go of anger is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. Well, let me tell you a couple of stories that get into this concept that's in my presentation about Germany. Last summer, I was heading back home to Hawaii from Washington, D.C., and stopped in San Diego to have dinner with a very old friend, a dear friend, Azim Kamisa. His story is amazing. Over 30 years ago, his son was unknowingly delivering pizza to a gang. The gang's initiation of a 14-year-old to membership was to shoot the delivery driver, which he did. Azim's son fell back into his car and drowned in his own blood. After a year of unimaginable grief, Azim sought some comfort by reaching out to the grandfather who has raised the murderer. The 14-year-old murderer had been tried as an adult and sentenced to 25 years to life imprisonment at age 14. Azim found that the grandfather was just as bereft as he. So the two of them began to speak together to youth groups about gangs, violence, and forgiveness. To date, they've spoken to over 2 million kids. And Tony, the murderer, whose life was turned around by Azim's forgiveness of him killing his son, is now out of prison and a featured speaker in these talks. You can imagine how powerful that is and how many lives they've turned around. Well, when we had dinner, Azim informed me that he had just formed a new organization that he'd been planning for over 2 years called Peace Through Forgiveness, through which he intends to get 10% of the population to live from principles of forgiveness rather than revenge in order to change our current dominant culture. So he and I ended up deciding that my educational organization, the Maitreya Institute, should be the tax-exempt sponsor of the Peace Through Forgiveness program. Well, within a week of that meeting, I went to a conference in Bhutan on reimagining education from the perspective of gross national happiness. Well, that's another story for another time. But on the bus from the airport to the hotel for the conference, I began talking to a couple, and my experience with forgiveness came up. The wife immediately said to me, "We Germans need forgiveness. We still feel shame and guilt about Germany's actions in World War II. This despite Germany's 80-year post-war efforts of apologies and restitution, and being such a good citizen country in the world since then." So we decided to do a forgiveness program in Germany set around May 8th, 2025, which is the 80th anniversary day of German surrender in World War II. And coincidentally, that's the day I was born, May 8th, 1945, the actual day they surrendered. Well, so it obviously resonated with me. Well, nothing goes in a straight line. Katarina got ill. She and her husband were not able to participate, but I contacted a good friend of mine in Hawaii, Chuck Sposano, who's been doing his psychology of vision trainings and workshops in Germany for over 40 years. And also my good friends, Fred Luskin, the founder and director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Project, and Carolyn Sakai, who's used thought field therapy to help many people resolve past traumas, including the remarkable results she got from using this thought field therapy method in Rwanda years after their Holocaust. As a result, on May 8th, Fred, Carolyn, Chuck, and two others made 45-minute presentations on their different methodologies for forgiveness. And we ended that Zoom program at the exact time that the armistice had been signed in Germany 80 years ago. Over the next 3 days, Chuck led all-day workshops in Frankfurt, Germany, where I was there with him, that we called ancestral healing. Chuck's work is unique, but similar to programs that are called family constellations. Someone works at the front of the group with Chuck to get in touch with and fully experience the emotions they're carrying about the issue. They then identify others in the group to role play persons who were involved in the issue. Here, perhaps German ancestor soldiers, ancestor victims, and the parents, maybe these living people who either supported it or did not support the group member who was talking in their dealing with this issue. So these people, it's amazing how the people that are selected all begin to identify themselves in these roles and get the sense of where the people that they are supposed to be are feeling. Eventually, the group proceeds to have a cathartic reconciliation and expressions of love with the proponent and each other. This proves to be incredibly deep emotional and psychological healing work. Interestingly, of the 100 people who were there live in Frankfurt and the 50 or so who were on Zoom, 90% had some connection with ancestors who were either persecuting Germans or persecuted by Germans during the war. Chuck's workshop was really highly successful, and recognizing relief, much of the feelings all were holding about this, if not fully eliminating their remaining issues for some. So this program, which just a few weeks ago demonstrated to me once again the power of forgiveness on letting go of negative past emotions from the deepest kinds of traumas. Imagine if the Israelis and Palestinians had worked through their emotions and found forgiveness after the first war in 1948 when the Jews were given political control of Israel. Or if the forgiveness work had been done in Germany after World War I, would there have even been a World War II? We've been asked by some Japanese and Chinese friends to do further ancestral healing programs about their World War II issues, but we haven't yet set up anybody. So we are open to suggestions for future workshops, and I'm delighted to be able to talk about this here, and wonderful Talia, Naomi, all the Petersons and friends for creating Ponopono Peace Initiative and all the great work you're doing. Thank you so much. Aloha.
Thank you so much for that, Roger. Our next speaker is Camilla Pedersen.
My name is Camilla Peterson. I am a junior, finishing my junior year at BU Hawaii. The topic is understanding institutional betrayal and how to address sexual violence on campus. Worldwide, across a woman's lifetime, 1 in 3 women will experience sexual violence. In the United States alone, every 68 seconds, somebody in the US is subjected to sexual violence. Women ages 18 to 24 are at an elevated risk of sexual violence, with college students' risk being 30 times higher than the average. The church university that I attend is Brigham Young University, Hawaii. They do not have any stats on sexual assault or sexual violence, how big of an issue it is on campus, because they haven't done a climate report. But BYU Provo has done a climate report, and their survey done in 2021 found that 4.7% of the students, which is 1,645, had experienced some form of unwanted sexual contact during the 12 months of that research. As stated previously, BYU Hawaii does not have any stats on this, and neither does BYU Idaho, but assuming their numbers are the same, that would mean that BYU Hawaii, with a student body of 2,836 students a year, had 133 cases of sexual assault within 1 year. Sexual assault is an umbrella term that includes rape, but isn't just rape. It also includes groping, unwanted kissing, touching. Sexual violence can have very long-lasting impacts on survivors. The most widely studied and long-term psychological consequence of experiencing sexual assault is PTSD. Data from a large-scale study comparing the effects of different types of traumatic events suggests that the experience of sexual assault may be more likely to lead to PTSD than any other types of traumatic events. This is a journal extract from one of my friends, which is shared with permission. I think this past week is the closest to hell I've ever been. My stomach is in such tight knots and my body shuts down so often that I can't even function. I constantly feel like vomiting and I can't eat. Never in my life have I had self-harm thoughts, but now they're so hard to avoid. It's so scary not being in a place where I can trust my brain. And when it's good, it's fine, but when it's bad, it's hell. And even when it's good, it's not. My brain is just mush. I've never felt so spiritually and physically violated and gross and just worthless. I want to rip out my eyes and scratch off my neck. Any part of me that was all touched by him, I want to burn. This isn't fair. Why didn't he care? Why am I the one who my friends find sobbing on the side of the road? Why am I the one that has to relive my trauma over and over and over and over while talking to the officials? Why is he on campus carefree while I get panic attacks anytime I'm alone? Why are my grades dropping? Why can't I breathe? I need this to be over. I just want to breathe. So far, what we have discussed is the direct violence and the aftermath of the direct violence that takes place with sexual violence. Using Galting's triangle as a framework for this issue, there are two other aspects of violence that need to be talked about, and that's the structural and cultural violence. So direct violence is the act that you can see, like the assault, and the aftermath that comes from it, like PTSD and like all the trauma and issues that come with sexual assault. Cultural and structural violence are different. So we like to talk about Galting's triangle like it's an iceberg, and direct violence is what you can see, and cultural and structural violence are below the iceberg and what you can't see, but both of them work to support the direct violence. Structural violence is harm embedded in social structures and systems, whether it be laws or institutions or just the way things are run. Cultural violence is norms, beliefs, and attitudes within a society or religion or school that justify the direct violence. Institutional betrayal, which we will now get into, highlights the cultural and structural violence that is found at universities specifically to support the direct violence of the sexual assault. Institutional violence refers to how institutions, through policies or actions or inactions, can harm or hinder healing. Due to how risk-adverse Title IX operates, the process can be equally or more traumatizing to survivor, and therefore researchers have dubbed it as a second rape. There are several ways in which Title IX is not survivor-friendly, and we'll go over a few of them. One of them is having conflicting incentives, since universities are legally obligated to take care of stuff, but they face a competing and often stronger desire to want to protect their own interests, to want to look like a good school, because nobody wants to be that school that's known to have a bunch of sexual assault cases on, even though we all know it happens everywhere, and as the stats previously showed. And women at college are at a 3 times higher risk than average, but nobody wants that label, and so universities spend a lot of time trying to protect their image instead of supporting the survivor, which can be really traumatizing for the victim. This leads to universities often preferring to minimize or ignore the violence instead of addressing it. One of the ways they minimize it is by not even getting climate reports done, by not having the proper support for their students, like therapy, by suggesting students take a leave of absence to go home and figure stuff out instead of giving them the support that they're legally obligated to on campus. Title IX is also full of many complex and confusing policies that are not always fully explained to the students. This complexity creates new barriers for survivors trying to understand their rights and options. There's also a sense of organizational dependency, so complex policies make survivors depend on the university representatives to understand their rights and options, but then this dependency allows university actors to sort cases into options that pose minimal risk to the institution and potentially circumventing formal investigation survivors originally wanted. This dependency may make survivors feel pressured or steered towards informal resolutions, which are often vaguely described and may offer limited outcomes like an apology or training. So each sphere of violence bleeds into each other. A lot of what was just talked about was institutional violence, structural violence, where policies and systems are supporting the direct violence. Some cultural violence that is often seen throughout Title IX and throughout administration's handling of sexual assault is prioritizing the perpetrator's future over the survivors. Gendered rationalization frames such as empathy, which allows them to reinterpret their primary goal as protecting the future of the young man. Since most sexual assaults found on university is between a man and a woman, and the woman is most often the survivor. Sexual assault, there's a 2 to 8 false positive report, which means you have got a 92 to a 98% chance that the survivor is correctly accusing the boy at hand. Another cultural attitude that supports the direct violence of sexual assault is by minimizing the survivor's trauma or credibility. They may also minimize the severity of violence or question the survivor's motives. A low rate of sanctions and punishment for perpetrators contributes to the problem. Universities may prefer linear sanctions over meaningful interventions, which then sends out a very clear message that they don't care and those actions are okay. Survivors are taught to blame themselves for perceived failures, such as not overcoming barriers to reporting or not effectively navigating complex procedures. This manufactured self-blame can be an essential mechanism of institutional betrayal. These organizational actions, or more importantly, inactions, exacerbate trauma, which is the definition of institutional betrayal. The psychological impact of this betrayal is described as similar in severity to the original act of sexual violence and has been called akin to a second rape. Some intervention strategies and prevention strategies that universities could set in place that would help survivors would start by having regular climate reports. These surveys are needed to monitor the issue and to see how big of a problem it really is and what the students themselves feel like is needed and how the university can help them and uphold their legal and moral obligation. There is a significant need for additional training for students and for staff on what sexual assault looks like, on what consent looks like, on how to respond to sexual violence, what to do with your student, what to expect from your student. Nearly half of BYU Provo survey participants reported not receiving any prevention training at all, and many students were unaware of off-campus or on-campus resources. Education should cover assault, sexual harassment, victim blaming, rape myths, consent, and healthy relationships, because there's so much more cultural and structural that I haven't even touched on that goes into this and it will either make or break the way a survivor heals from this experience. And everyone needs to be educated, because if it's 1 in 3 women, that's going to be one of your friends, that's going to be one of your siblings, that's going to be one of your classmates. It is also crucial to challenge the myth that a trauma response requires just fight or flight, because responses like freezing, fawning, or appeasing are common and do not invalidate the assault. This reflects an outdated understanding of trauma. The way survivors are treated by the institutions they turn to for help is crucial in determining how traumatic a sexual assault will be. The community's response to a survivor's story will make or break their healing. Universities must go beyond compliance and truly support victims and hold perpetrators accountable.
We would like to thank the recording presentation of Camilla. And with that, we're moving on to our Q&A session for session 2. And I would like to thank and show my appreciation to all of our presenters who were really mindful of the time. We're like really good with the time right now. So let's just move on to the Q&A, and then after that to our third session. So there is a question for Jose. which says, Jose, which strategy that you mentioned do you feel you depend on the most? And since we have a little bit more time, feel free to speak whatever you'd like.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. What strategy? Um, I guess I would just revert to open lines of communication. I think if you don't have open lines of communication with someone, there's probably going to be some sort of conflict coming down the line at some point. And once more, going back to, the tone of voice and how important that is. I sometimes share the story of I used to work at a call center, encouraging folks to take these health surveys. This is almost like like 15 years ago. And I didn't know it then, but as I fast forward, it was actually some of the best training for the work that I do now. There's great power in knowing when to talk a little faster, talk a little slower, pause, sitting in that moment of silence with folks, and being able to kind of read the room. Especially when if you're on the phone and you don't have everything, the nonverbal expressions in the hands that we sometimes use to express ourselves. So yeah, just being able to do that, I think, is so important. Having a good read of folks, and not only open lines of communication, but along with that comes active listening. I find that a lot of folks, unfortunately, have different systems we have set in place that have never been allowed or had the opportunity to be heard, to actually had practice active listening with them. Um, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. There is a question for Roger. Roger, do you offer training on running these forgiveness workshops?
The workshop I was talking about in Germany, yes, Chuck Spezzano, and I can get to Reka or Naomi his information. He has regular trainings for these people, and he does them all over the world. He went to Germany, and he had just actually went from Japan doing an 8-day conference to Germany to do a 3-day conference. And he has trainers in many, many places. So yes, that's available. Uh, uh, Fred Luskin at the Stanford Research Project, he's got a book on forgiveness, Forgive for Good. Uh, and people like Carolyn Sakai do trainings too in thought field therapy. So it's all available. And if you want to ask Naomi or Reka, and I'd be happy to get some more detailed information to you.
Thank you so much. There was another question similar to that one. So it looks like there are more people who would love to be involved with Peace Through Forgiveness. So yeah, we would appreciate if these participants could reach out to
Yeah,
you.
great. The Peace Through Forgiveness program that Azim is doing through my organization in San Diego he's got something called Peace Through Forgiveness Coalition. So he's really getting organizations together to do what I mentioned, trying to get 10% of the people to look at forgiveness instead of revenge. And it's so fundamental to every religion. You look at any religion, and this is what we did when we first started the Hawaii Forgiveness Project back in 2003. We got every religion to come in, and they all say, yeah, this is fundamental. So why the hell aren't we doing it? Because we're not evolved enough or we're not paying attention enough. It's not just religions, it's every culture. And it's for you, because if you don't do it, you end up with the kind of things we have going on and all the speakers talking about it. So uh, there was one more thing I'll say. There's a wonderful Auntie Mahealani Henry on the Big Island. And she came to our forgiveness project and she says, look, you can have all the trauma and drama you want in your life, but if you want to have a good life, a Pono life, a meaningful life, you just need to do two things: forgive and be grateful. And I think those are very, very powerful. And I also believe until we get to where people are living that, what Azim's trying to do, until the fundamental group is living that way, we're just not going to change things because we're too upset about what happened. We're too much living in the past and an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and then everybody's blind and can't eat. So I'm happy to put any of this information to back to you, Naomi, so people can get to it. And yeah, it's a big part of what I feel is important at this time in my life.
Thank you so much, Roger. We appreciate it so much. There is one more question to Jose. So Jose, for those just beginning this journey, what is one practical step you would recommend to help us move forward? Additionally, do you have a thought-provoking question that could guide us in personalizing this experience?
It's a really good question. Thank you. I think one practical step that I've turned to is the power of reflection and taking that time. I know we're so quick to move from one thing to the next, but take a pause, take a step back, reflect upon your own journey. I think it's important to um, see what has been your journey, acknowledge your accomplishments, your achievements, how you've overcome challenges in your life, situations, problems, conflicts, whatever you want to call them. Um, Understanding that process, because there's a lot that we can learn in retrospect from that, and not losing sight of that as we move forward. And I'll share briefly for myself. So a couple of months ago, I was made aware that my contract with the university would no longer continue. Just long story short. And so although it is challenging to be in the space of like doing my job searching and not knowing what the next step is, I do acknowledge the privilege that I have of having been provided the opportunity to do this type of good work and understanding it's also this isn't the only pathway to do this work through a job. There's so many ways that we do this in community through every conversation that we have, and we can continue to do this good work. And yeah, I think just as you learn about them, make sure to give back. I highly encourage connecting and collaborating with our youth. They are doing some amazing things. I'm constantly inspired by high school, middle school students who I can clearly say when I was their age, I was not even doing half of what they're doing. And so it gives me hope for a brighter future that we're going to be okay. Not that, we need to rely fully on them. We need to collaborate with them and assist where we can. But yeah, just see where you can assist. Try to focus on the positive because there is a lot of negative out there. It's easy to go down that path. And it's okay if you need to there's therapy, there's counseling, there's assistance out there. So please take those proactive steps. That's thinking of peace building beyond the field is another good thing because it restricts it when we think of it as a field. Think about how it's embedded into our everyday lives, into the work that we do, into how we interact with our, do you know your mailman's name? Do you know the person that comes and picks up the trash? Do you know the person that, the custodial staff at your job? Do you know the name of the people at the farmer's market that you go to? Besides that, what else do you know about them? Get to know your community because I think the more we do that, especially here in Hawaii, in more time that I'm here, I realize it's a small island. Everything's interconnected. And even further, like everything in this world is interconnected. I love it when people reach out to me, like, let me connect you with somebody in like Ohio. And then I'm like, oh, wonderful. I've met them before already. This is great. The world's getting a little bit smaller. And that's really what it's all about. Because during these challenging times, understanding those lineages and how we're all interconnected is amazing. I mean, Roger, I've been seeing Roger in the community over the years. David, I met over it's so good to see you, brother. I met you and he did a wonderful talk. Susan was also another wonderful collaborator. Michael North here. So I'm just, Ide, I see a lot of wonderful familiar names, good friends. So yes, making the Pedersen family, doing the good work you're doing. So thank you. I think, building that community is important. And constantly understanding that what else am I not covering? Because we get so comfortable in what we do in the routine of our lives. And so how can we challenge ourselves? How can we lean to discomfort? And so as I'm going through this job search, I'm like, hey, it's an opportunity to lean into my discomfort and grow. It's part of that evolution. There's always change in our lives. That's the one thing we can rest assured for. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose and Roger. That was very inspiring. Seeing people as people is a core value of peace building, and you all expressed it this value very well. This was a wonderful session on peace building.
I want you to know, Jose, we are not letting you leave Hawaii, period.
Rest assured, I'm not leaving Hawaii. I'll still be around.
All right.
Thank
Just
you,
want to
I
make
appreciate
sure.
it. Thank you.
So now we're moving on to our third session, which is where the topic is multicultural approaches to peace building. And we are going to have two speakers in this session. The first one will be David Whippy. David Whippy is an assistant professor in the Intercultural Peace Building program at BYU Hawaii. He is the current director of the David O. McKay Center for Intercultural Understanding. His academic interests include navigating the opportunities that come with Indigenous peace building in the globalized world. And his topic will be Veivo Sakiyaga as an online interactive Indigenous peace building tool. After David, we will hear from Rebecca Burnham. Rebecca Burnham is a dramatist, award-winning columnist, and community peace builder who uses the stage as a tool for bridging divides and while lifting and unlifting participants. Lifting and uniting. I'm so sorry. She is a co-founder of the newly launched Naotosi Okosiksi Arts Society, devoted to cross-cultural collaboration in order to build joy, belonging, and resilience through the arts. And she is also a founder of Summit Stages, an initiative to unleash the power of musical theater to grow the beloved community. Her topic will be on musical theater as an untapped peace builder. And yes, and then we will have a Q&A session after these two speakers. So David, you're up next.
Okay, allow me to share screen here. Can everybody see my screen right there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present. I'm grateful to hear and learn from your expertise, and just grateful to be here today. So thank you to Ponopono for allowing me to speak in this space. I understand my time is not long, so I'm going to do as much as I can. Towards the end of the presentation, I have my email up. So if you're interested in the particular topic, please don't hesitate to reach out. I think my title, or what I'm going to be talking about, is very applicable to what we're doing here in this conference space. Veivo Sakiyaga as an online interactive Indigenous peace building tool. It's speaks to conversation. It speaks to having these talk stories. It speaks to building relationships. And I'll be going through this as we go through this short presentation. So I wanted to set the space first because I think it's important to do so. As I said, dialogue is an essential part of peace building. It's a lot of time, it's one of the key fundamental points that starts off addressing conflict. And in my humble view, it's needed right throughout these processes, whether we're addressing conflict before conflict occurs or whether we're in conflict, and we need to keep talking. And I appreciate what Jose was saying about we need to find space to talk to each other as much as possible. And so connecting that to the Indigenous space, I'm from Fiji, being blessed to be born in that Pacific space. And I wanted to talk about this idea of Veivo Sakiyaga being used in the Fijian space right now. And you'll see some connections to Hawaiian culture and also to Indigenous cultures. But I also wanted to emphasize that the impacts of this not only being talked about or being used in the Fijian or Pan-Pacific space, but going beyond those borders, especially when we're talking about space being an online space also. So let's move on here. I put together dialogue and peace building. I wanted to start off with these two different, similar yet different terms. Talanoa, I think we've heard about Talanoa before, and both of these terms are based off the sacredness or based off discussion that's done in the Pan-Pacific space. Talanoa is way more, way more accessible in the sense it means sharing in the Fijian custom. It also means offloading of some of the stories that you have. It speaks to self-care. It talks about having this relaxed conversation, communication. Sometimes people will say, shooting the breeze. I can talk about anything with these people in these groups, right? Sharing stories. It's motivated by the space that people are in. Sometimes it takes on a little bit more of a formal connotation to it if there are chiefs sitting in the room, if there are people of importance sitting in the space. But typically it emphasizes more informal sorts of conversation. At its core, it emphasizes the relationships that people have with one another, emphasizing respect, trust, and recognizing the humanity of others and within their different communities that they're in. On the other hand, again, similar yet different is Vevosaki Yanga. And Vevosaki Yanga speaks to having more intimate, worthwhile discussions, a lot more on the formal side of things, and where instead of shooting the breeze, it's almost like we're gonna talk about climate change as an example, or we're gonna focus on this and we're gonna dive into it. And because of the relationships that I have with Peter, John, I can speak from my stories without in a way that's more open than I would do in a Talanoa session. So again, it connotes a neutral sense of conversation, more dialogue rather than storytelling. And you can see how the word is broken down with regards to Vevosaki Yanga, very important in the Fijian space. Built on the idea of oral traditions in our culture, how these stories were brought and told, how we kept our histories, and how a lot of times in conferences in Fiji and decision-making in Fiji, a lot of these the processes that go into play are had in these Talanoa sessions. I'll give you an example from our parliamentarians. They'll go through the formal parliamentary process, but then outside of those structures or those processes, they're engaging in Talanoa and moving on to Vevosaki Yanga to try and build relationships and work with the relationships they have to address the conflicts or the issues that they have at hand. And so they're bringing together Western and indigenous ways of addressing or ways of looking at conflict resolution. At its heart, Fijian indigenous values, vanua, or belonging to a particular space and identity. It speaks to velomani, which denotes love and respect, meaning that there's building a relationship and we're hoping to build love and respect between people. And then it speaks to vuli, constant learning to be able to continue in that space. And it's reciprocated where I'm sharing, you're learning, you're sharing, I'm learning. Kind of denotes I'm bringing my baskets of knowledge. I'm sharing what I can with you, and you're sharing what you have with your baskets of knowledge with me. And we're going away well fed, if that makes sense. Some of its major characteristics in this space speak to these four elements. It's built on this face-to-face. So typically oral traditions, it's built at me sitting in a space. If I'm speaking to Roger, I'm in Roger's space where he's at right there. If I'm speaking to Jose, we're in the same geographical space. That's what emphasized, right? To build a humanity, build a relationship. It speaks to the sacredness of relationships. If relationships are important and sacred, how then do we change our way of being or the way that we are to be able to honor that sacredness in the relationship? And then it speaks to building a community that we all are able to contribute and collaborate with each other. As we move here. Now, how do we take that to the online space? This is an issue that I had in my PhD studies because I was going to Fiji to do my field research, but then COVID hit. So I had to do this all online using the methodology. Again, in research, you can use Talanoa and Vevosaki Yanga. I was using Vevosaki Yanga. How do I do this in a online space when there's quick examples here because of time? Face to face. I've been sitting the last hour here trying to get things together, but with face to face, how do I build this when somebody in a Zoom call with me is not on the call, right? I'm not calling anybody out, but just to think about it. Relationships. How do I build relationships where people can trust me if I'm online, right? How do I do that? Some of us may be able to do that more better than others. And community. How do I build community within this space? There's a lot of social media spaces available, but how do I do it in a way that's similar if I'm building a relationship with Roger and Jose in person on the ground with them? There's a difference to it. And then speaking to sacredness, can I build sacred relationships that I can invest in, relationships that can be taken and we can further collaboration, relationships that speak to the heart of working together, that speak to almost a brother-sister relationship. Can I do that in an online space? Some of the opportunities, and this is my second to last slide here, is a term called e-Vevosakiyanga. There's already e-Talanoa. Can I do this online? Opportunities, it's accessible. Online platforms, I can reach people in remote areas, right? With flexibility, we can have certain times. You don't have to travel, miles or kilometers to come to my village to be able to talk. We can just say, hey, 8 o'clock, HST, we'll meet, we'll come together, wherever you are in the world, let's do this. We can build, I'm optimistic that we can build, despite geographical separation, that we can build community on an online space. And again, part of being in the research part and academic research, I feel that as we Vevosakiyanga more so, there's learning that to be had there. So I'm looking at this from an optimistic perspective. I think it can bring and tie people together with who are looking for connections through identity, who are looking at ways to collaborate and cooperate to attend to the issues. It doesn't have to be necessarily in Fiji or particular Pacific island, because the world has become so small that now there are communities of, for example, Fijians in different parts of the world, and they're looking at identity, there may be internal conflicts, and we can use this to be able to build peace in these different spaces. I hope to continue using Vevosakiyanga as an online tool to bring interactive peace building, and I'm hoping to be able to teach and help support others looking to go into this space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, David. Next up is Rebecca.
Okay, let me stop share here.
Thank you so much. I just feel very privileged to have been here this afternoon. I am going to try and share my screen. And are we sharing? Yes. Okay. All right. I am here to talk about using musical theater as a tool for building peace. I want to step back for a minute and talk about polarization, because all the things that we talk about building peace, polarization combats those. Polarization undermines peace. How do we depolarize? The difficulty is we often appeal to common values like equality, kindness, liberty, justice, often religious values. In abstract, those values often collide. And that makes it very difficult to be able to work through our differences. We need some sort of an interface that helps us. And shared stories are that interface. A shared story provides us with context for how those values interact with each other. They teach us how to balance different perspectives, different needs. They give us a shared appreciation for all of the values we need to implement, and they give us a common script for resolving our conflicts. The problem with polarization is it tears our stories apart. As we polarize, we start telling ourselves half stories, one-sided narratives that support the way we see the world. Musical theater is mighty in its capacity to restore shared stories. When it's done right, every aspect of musical theater can do this. So let's start with creation. Musical theater invites collaboration in its creation. If we collaborate across divides, we can tell shared stories that involve listening deeply to each other so that we really understand, and then not trying to dominate the story, but to make space so that both sides of the narrative can be told. We can authentically represent other perspectives, and this process is transformative for the creators. In the production, if production values are to build the beloved community as well as to put on a great show, then we prioritize people. And people involved in musical theater learn to perspective take. They have to in order to act. Collaborative relationships build belonging because everybody has a contribution. Everybody matters. There's incredible emotional connection that comes through musicking together, as well as acting and dancing. And as we rehearse and rehearse and rehearse for months upon months, that shared story that we are telling gets into our bones. We deeply connect with it. This transforms cast and crew. And then we put on the show and change hearts. We open the minds and the hearts of our audience with our authentic representation of them. They are coming to a play where they might not expect to see themselves on the stage, at least not portrayed fairly. And when they find themselves fairly portrayed on stage, authentically represented on stage, that it opens them up to the whole experience. And once they are secure and feeling safe because they're represented well, they are open to new perspectives on others. This gives them the capacity to envision and love what's possible as we come together, and it transforms audiences. This is not just a theory, this has happened. So in 2019, I live in a very divided and ethnically divided community that has been this way for generations. And I created with my daughter a musical adaptation of the Peter Pan story that we put on in a couple communities that are mostly descendants of Latter-day Saint pioneers. Quite not a very diverse community, although the indigenous the reserve is just across the highway. But the nature of our community is such that highway that highway truly divides us. So we put on this production a couple times. We saw that just putting on musical theater created belonging and unity in the homeschool groups that we were doing it with. And the dream arrived to somehow invite our indigenous neighbors into this process, which and the Peter Pan story is a really great place to do that because it has an indigenous element. We realized we needed indigenous music. We needed it to be real. So we wound up, there were a series of like miraculous events that brought this to pass, but we wound up being able to invite indigenous collaborators into the musical. They impacted the story. They provided their own music, and the costuming and the whole deal. It was a true collaboration all the way along. And wow, the results, enduring friendships across an entrenched divide, all the way across. The authentic representation brought a diverse audience. We had people from the reserve who had never been to a theater in Cardston, filling the theater. We introduced new perspectives to people in town who'd never seen things that way. And we transformed attitudes among cast, crew, and audiences, and other initiatives have followed. So that is why we have Summit Stages. Now we need a new brand because right now there is one brand, one trusted brand for musical theater, and that is Broadway. That is what all the schools, any high school that can afford it will put on a Broadway production because they know that it's quality. However, if you live in a community like mine, they're not going to trust the Broadway shows that are coming out now, most of them. So they'll recycle the same 10 Broadway shows from the 50s and 60s, and then the occasional one that's recent. The new brand needs to be trusted like Broadway for quality. But every show of Summit Stages builds the beloved community, both by process and by message, from creation through performance. Our values are cohesion, collaboration, reverence, which involves being open to the transcendent, nurture, inspiration, and quality. Here's our roadmap. First, we gather our multitude. And that is a multitude of creators, producers, sponsors, performers, and playgoers. We need them all. Second, we create mighty musicals. We will do this with multi-month workshops that teach us how to collaborate across our divides. And with those multi-month workshops, we will hone our quality. Our scripts and performances need to be world-class. We need to do justice to our stories. With those things in hand, we can secure venues and prove to the people who run the theaters that our brand will make them money. And then we wow the world. The goal in 2034, that's 9 years from now, is we will stage shared and inspiring stories on all the stages in Salt Lake City during the 2034 Winter Olympics. Now, why Salt Lake City, of all places? Well, aside from the fact that that is where the Winter Olympics are happening in 9 years, and we need 9 years to get ready, I want to share some things that some peace builders, some renowned peace builders are saying. If you want examples of citizens overcoming divisiveness that often leaves the rest of us angry and demoralized, visit Utah. This is David Blankenhorn, who's the co-founder of Braver Angels. He says, I'm still trying to figure out what their secret is. Utah is a very conservative state, reliably Republican in its voting patterns, but somehow the people seem to be special, open to hearing other points of view, hospitable, willing to compromise for the common good. Now, then we've got Jonathan Rausch, a senior fellow of the Brookings Institute and a Jew, who says, for today's most intellectually complete and pragmatically proven vision of a distinctively scriptural pluralism, we should travel to Utah. Both of these gentlemen talked about the teachings of the dominant religion in Utah. Don't like to use the word dominant. But I can't think of a better one right now. So the majority religion in Utah, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that the theology is an underpinning of this openness to collaborating across divides. And so then I want to quote President Russell M. Nelson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who says, I urge you to choose to be a peacemaker now and always. We can literally change the world, one person and one interaction at a time. How? By modeling how to manage honest differences of opinion with mutual respect and dignified dialogue. So Salt Lake City is a beautiful place for this to launch because it is filled with people who see this peacemaking actually as peacemaking across divides, peacemaking with people we disagree with, as a religious call. How can you help? I don't even know where my time is and I can't see. So how you can help? First of all, gather to this initiative. So join the newsletter at summitstages.org. If you go to summitstages.org, there's a big thing that says join the newsletter. Press on that, give us your email, and then you're part of this movement. Share the newsletters. Forward them to everyone who might love this. You can donate. We've got a donate button on every newsletter, and collaborate. If you see opportunities to collaborate, and I've seen some with some of you, reply to the newsletter or contact me at info@summitstages.org and let's talk.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'd like to thank both David and Rebecca for contributing to this session on multicultural approaches to peace building. And now we are going to move on to our last Q&A session. So there are some questions. There's a question to David. So David, what have you found surprisingly easier to do online than in person when building these spaces?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one of it mainly is accessibility. We can get similar to our talk story, our Vevosaki Young, our Talanoa here. There's people from different parts of the world. And you can't, I mean, I don't want to say can't. It will be a little bit more difficult to gather in a village in Fiji. And maybe we'll have a conference there one day, who knows? But right now, this is so much easier to do than traveling to a certain part or a certain space. I also say, when I say accessibility, usually Vevosaki Yanga came out of the indigenous Fijian, which is the Itauke space. And so sometimes there are certain groups I want to say that's gatekeep the methodology, gatekeep this is how we do things. It's our culture, and so we're going to do it our way. And so that cuts off access to marginalized group. It cuts off access to women participants. In an online space, those barriers are down. There's inclusivity is what's emphasized, and you can have conversations with people across the board. Lastly, a lot of times when you do this Vevosaki Yang or Talanoa in person, there's cultural protocol that comes into play. So if I go to Sydney's place and it's a Vevosaki Yanga, I have to in a lot of ways, in Fiji we call sevu sevu, or I have to give a gift to be able to come into that space, whether it's yangona or kavo, whether it's some food, or whether it's a whale's tooth. I need to honor that space by coming in there. I don't think we have to do that on Teams. I mean, I don't think there's a way to give gifts unless you're sending a message or something in our space here. I've always thought about somebody's going to make a lot of money if you can share snacks on Zoom or Teams. But as of right now, there's no cultural barriers like that to be involved in this space. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. There is one more relating one. David, are you able to break down the word Veivosaki like you did with yoga? Worthwhile.
Sorry, I lost you there. Can you say that again?
Are you able to break down the word Veivosaki like you did with yoga?
Yes. Veivosaki Yoga in the Fijian context, Vei means like we. Instead of I, it's like we. Veivosaki, Saki in my dialect, Saki speaks to sharing. So a lot of times in the loose connotation, it means we share. We share our thoughts, we share our feelings, we share our emotions, we share. And that sharing has to be built on relationship and trust that I'm going to be sharing with someone who won't, in a lot of ways, take advantage. But I also have to be vulnerable to share. And so we share.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, David. There's a question to Rebecca. So Rebecca, someone said that I really love the idea of collaborating on a project where communities come together to tell each other stories, not with one group helping another, but as equal partners in the process. Are there strategies or examples you can share that would help us successfully do something similar in our own communities on a smaller scale?
That's a great question. And Braver Angels Music Network actually has mastered this. They host something called a songwriting workshop where they have people from different sides of an issue, excuse me, come together, and they will come and do it in your community. and they have a whole process that helps people to hear each other, to ask questions, and just really listen to each other. And then after both sides have heard each other's stories, they create art together to share it with an audience. It's just a really beautiful thing to watch, and I'm really excited that I'll be getting some training in that this summer.
Thank you so much. Can you share that what you just shared on Braver Angels? Yeah,
You'd like me to put a link or something in the chat, is that right?
maybe. Yeah, because I'm interested in, and probably there are many other people who would be. We have a lot of students here attending the conference as well. So yeah, if you could insert it in the chat, that'd be great.
What I will do is I've written a newsletter about that. I will send you the newsletter, and that has all the information, the links and everything that will make it easy for you.
Thank you. Sounds amazing. Thank you. Thank you. My role ends here. To me, this has been a wonderful experience, this conference. I would like to thank all of our presenters who participated and all the participants who were here and saw the presentations of our speakers. And this has been very, very enriching. And this is the first time we've done it, the first time I moderated it. So I'm so grateful. I think this has been going really well, and there was so much to learn, and I will give the microphone to Naomi, who will share her closing remarks with us. So thank you again.
Thank you, Reka. That was wonderful. I appreciate you and the work that you and McLean and Steve has done to make this a reality. It's been really cool to watch you guys have this process and to see people come together and to see students and practitioners and community members just come together to kind of discuss peace and these complex issues and challenge systems, and to just come together and reimagine our future together. And this is really great. There's been so many presentations that I have just changed the way that myself personally has viewed an issue or a thought or a conversation. And I just think that it wouldn't have been possible without any of these attendees and with these presenters willing to be brave and to reach out and to do something different and to just, take advantage of this opportunity to connect. And so I'm so grateful for everyone who's been involved. I just want to leave with the idea that peace is not a single act. It's a posture, it's a practice, and a way of being. And so today, as you guys are leaving, I hope that each one of you had something in your heart that was touched, or a way that you saw the world a little bit differently. And I hope that as we continue on this path of peace, that we will be comfortable asking questions, sharing our stories, listening to other stories, and asking questions. I love David's conversations about having like Talanoa and the different spaces to be able to talk about these conversations. I loved hearing about the conflict in Gaza and just a different perspective on that, and the conflict in Ethiopia. It was not something that was on my personal radar, but I can see the themes of conflict, but also this great desire for communities to come together and to make a difference. And with Rebecca's last conference, her last presentation, where she talked about doing her Neverland play, actually my kids were in that play, and it was a beautiful experience to have both communities come together in such a positive, great, fabulous way. You saw people who had never talked to each other, like never even taken time to go across the road, to come together. And some of those kids, I was one of the parents that helped with the kids and interacting and keeping them quiet backstage and stuff. Some of those kids are still Facebook friends of mine and will still reach out to me and just say, hey, my grandma just died, or hey, I'm having a problem, or hey, that really was one of the best experiences of my life. And so I can see personally how the arts really has a unique way of bringing people together at a very equal way, which is another different space of sharing stories. And I just really love this. I hope that you guys know that Ponopono Peace Initiative was created to help peace builders, specifically to help students on their peace building path, but also to connect practitioners and students and community members and initiatives together. I hope that as you guys have listened, that if you have an idea or you want to start a partnership, make a partnership, or even telling people about this conference and tell people about the different presentations, that you'll act on that you will intentionally try to stay connected and not with each other, but also just with this space, because sometimes peace building can be long. It can be hard and it can be slow. And sometimes a very common theme I've noticed is people can get really burnt out. But I think that if we can walk our path together, if we can share our stories, if we can be here together, then we can be there to help each other to not be burnt out, to take care of, do our self-care, to engage in communities and activities. And I just want to thank all of you. From the bottom of my heart, this was absolutely fabulous. I had enjoyed every moment of it. And so once again, peace starts small. It starts in our voices and our research and in just like the conversations we had today. So aloha, and I hope to see you guys next time.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, everyone.
Aloha. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Much for attending.
Yes. And